Urgent, topical, and timely. Power Breakfast with Tessa Dooms, 6 to 9 a.m.
The time is 8:15. You're on Power Breakfast this morning with Tessa Dooms. Brooks Spector joins us, international relations expert. Brooks, I always think that you're in the U.S. and then I remember, God says down the road, you should actually come into studio, Brooks.
Well, good morning. Today I can't because I'm in Cape Town.
Oh, you are out of the country then.
Well, no, our daughter just had a baby, so we came down.
Congratulations.
To greet the newborn, as it were.
Congratulations. Brooks, these talks between the U.S. and South Africa, we really don't know the details at this point, which has opened it up for a lot of speculations. This NDA, is that a normal thing? It's the first time I think I've heard, Zane Dango talk about an NDA. But do we understand what is behind or what might be going on behind closed doors?
Yeah, it's interesting. Usually, when you have negotiations over trade issues or other economic concerns, you don't have a formal non-disclosure agreement, but the two parties or the multiple parties agree that they're not going to talk about it in an intermediate moment, until they get to the point where either they've agreed to something or they stomp out of the room mutually. This was a little too formal for my taste. And in any case, usually when you have these kinds of negotiations, both sides are just really eager to leak details to the media because they want you to to understand their perspective, their position, and why they're either making reasonable requests or they're being treated unfairly. So this is this is a little bit too legalistic sounding, I think. Yes, but one of I've been thinking about this question now since I got a call from your station yesterday to talk about it. And I realized there are actually two different tracks of discussion between the U.S. and South Africa. One is the more standard kind of economic argument, whether or not the trade barriers, if they're formal as in tariffs or non-tariff as in, say, phytosanitary sanctions or restrictions as they might be on food products. That's one version of things, and those are the kinds of things that economic negotiations usually take under their wing because that's their job. But between the U.S. and South Africa, there seems now to be this dynamic of a whole collection of political security issues, which include domestic affairs in South Africa,
which is quite anomalous. As you're saying there, and I think back to that Oval Office moment. How did our internal issues in the country become the center point of these kinds of negotiations around tariffs and the economy? I think that is peculiar.
Well, part of the problem, of course, is that so much of what the Trump administration is saying along those lines, the triple B, double E business, the white farmer genocide thing, and what was the other one at this point, of the land expropriation issue, those are playing to a considerable degree to American domestic concerns. And if you divorce it from domestic considerations, you can't actually, because it's a constituency in the U.S. that's being played to see we are watching out for you and all people like you around the world. If you get my drift.
No, I get it completely. And it does also play into a broader global narrative around what I think has not been named yet, and I'm going to dare to name it, a resurgence of white supremacy solidarity. This kind of sense that whiteness is under attack, and we have to then band together in terms of white supremacy and its place in the world, because this is not just about, bread and butter issues. It's not just about, deals or land or whatever. It is also about who the demographic is that is being impacted by what is being alleged.
I would phrase it just ever so slightly differently and say that it is defending those people who feel they are under attack.
Yeah. That sounds exactly right. And that does bring us to the question of what does this mean for our sovereignty, both in terms of things like BEE, in terms of things like land, but as our callers have been mentioning this morning, protecting our local industries like the chicken industry from just having, Trump kind of dump tariffs and then at the expense of our own internal sovereignty around transformation.
Well, I think those are two slightly separate things. You can the normal, as we said earlier, the normal process for economic negotiations is not usually about these ideological questions or the socio-political issues, but in this case they are because of that domestic constituency. But if you negotiate, you can make whatever requests or desires or demands you feel you must, and it's up to the other side to say, well, we won't discuss that, or no, we disagree with you, or yes, we can be flexible. And I mean, at the risk of sounding pompous, I would go back to what the ancient Greek historian Thucydides said about the Peloponnesian War. The powerful do what they can, and the weak do what they must. And South Africa is in the weaker of the two positions. So as a result, the negotiations and the blueprint that the South African government issued, yesterday or the day before, that all talks to purely economic issues. Whether or not tariffs or other things on poultry imports or blueberries or whatever it might be. That's a trade issue, and that's not a sovereignty question because South Africa imports poultry from Europe, It imports poultry from Britain, it imports poultry from Brazil, and the question was not about whether or not they should be allowed to import American poultry, but whether or not the quota is appropriate and are there regulations that must pertain.
Sure.
I mean,
there are other... The reciprocal nature as well. Hamlet from Pretoria, you have a question for Brooks?
Yes, Brooke. I mean, you'd know that even the quality of this import of poultry, from Brazil, particularly in the U.S. I mean, in South Africa, our, the brain that is allowed to be injected in those chickens, it's about roughly 15 to 20%, and the ones that comes into the country, it's about 25 to 30%. That's just one aspect. But my question to you, Brooke, don't you think that this is an opportunity at the moment for South Africa, that they could explore already fluid markets, particularly in Qatar, Dubai, India, China, and some parts of Asia and some parts of Europe. I mean, because of when you look at the balance of trade in terms of agricultural produce that goes into the U.S. vis-a-vis the demand elsewhere, you can see that the market it's there, it's existing. For me, I don't see that. We should be jumping up and down, being worried about this tariff issue. It's not a South African issue. This is how Trump wants to do business with other countries. So we need to say, in long term, how do we create, export markets that are sustainable, that are they're not necessarily politically driven. These are strictly trade issues and commercial issues. And I think this is the right time to do that. I was shocked to see the DTIC saying that they are exploring new markets. It doesn't make sense.
Thanks, Hamlet. Brooks?
Yeah, I think there are three things that I would respond to that rather than criticize or disagree. One, the poultry issue, and I've talked about this for years with people, the poultry issue is not simply a question of importers versus local producers. The missing element in all of that has been the consumer, and imported poultry tends to make it easier for the consumer to buy poultry products less expensively. And there is, in fact, a whole sector of the South African poultry industry that is new farmers or new poultry raisers that are very different than the big boys, than the rainbow chickens and the other ones. And they have an interest in importing poultry parts rather than warding it off because it becomes part of their business. That's point one. point two is it is really good to talk about diversifying markets, but it requires an understanding that to do that takes time.
Yeah.
It doesn't take days or weeks or months. It takes years. And it also requires an enormously cooperative effort between the exporters, the companies, and the government. That's why
Gotcha.
you see suddenly the government has decided they need better trade commissioners or more of them abroad, because they basically have been coasting along without a significant, serious effort.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is, the third part of it is that when you do that, you have to take into consideration the fact that you're competing against all manner of other producers.
Yeah. And other possibilities and other interests there as well. I'm going to have to end it over there, Brooks, but thank you so much. That was a very important breakdown of what the possibilities and opportunities are. Thanks, Hamlet, as well there for raising that question.